So, assuming that Joel Embiid is healthy, I don't think the Nets have a chance of beating the Sixers in this series. I think we can learn some things about the Sixers nonetheless in this, because the Nets are going to throw some interesting things at them. The Nets have used a zone defense at times this year. They've also just had really creative moments on their defense in terms of trapping ball handlers and just doing things that are not normal, I guess. And you could argue that, given how weird of a team Philly is, throwing some unconventional defense at them may be the thing that makes them go, oh crap, what do we do right now? Not saying that Philly then can't make adjustments, whether it's Ben Simmons being an off-ball player or Jimmy Butler getting into the post, like off the ball a little bit more, guys sitting off-ball screens, Redick running around like a crazy person, Embiid's general existence. So there's options they're going to have for everything, but it's just forcing them to make those decisions, I think, is going to tell us some things about this team, because what have we been saying all season? Does the fit make sense, you know? At the end of games when Ben Simmons is relegated to a handoff type of player, or when teams just back up off of him so much to where it's actually like kind of silly to look at all of it happening, or when Embiid wants to post up and Jimmy Butler's defender is a little too eager to bring the double on Embiid because he respects Jimmy's jumper, but he doesn't respect it like that. And can Tobias Harris get enough ball handling opportunities while all of this is happening? It'll just be interesting to see what happens. And the first thing I want to bring up is the idea of the zone defense, which is something the Nets pull out every now and then. I think it's safe to say it's going to happen at some point in the series, and it'll just be cool to see what Brett Brown chooses to do to go at it. I mean, it depends on the zone. Some zones dare you to shoot jumpers, and I mean, Jimmy Butler being relied on to just shoot 3 after 3 with hopefully like a decent contest. You might be able to live with that as a defense. I mean, it'll depend on how Jimmy's shot is going at that moment, I guess. Crowding the paint against Ben Simmons already kind of makes sense, so just having the entire team all in on it and not just Ben's defender could lead to some interesting things. But even then, you can't do that too much because Ben can just run a two-man game with a Redick to get him some open threes, some basically wide open threes in that scenario. But still, there's definitely wiggle room there for accentuating what Ben Simmons is already not good at, right? And you're also forcing Brett Brown to potentially make some crunch time decisions. I mean, we're going to have to see if the Nets can get a lot of close games against Philly. I think they could at least get one at home. The talent difference in this series is pretty wild, but given everything about the Nets, you have to assume that Philly's not just going to run them out of the building in 5 or so games, I guess. So in those close games, are we going to see like what's going to happen? Is Ben Simmons going to be able to actually be Ben Simmons, or is it going to be this whole get the ball to Jimmy because he can run the ISOs, and then Ben Simmons is just kind of sitting there at the dunker's spot? Because I don't know if this team at their very best can have Ben Simmons not handling the ball all the time. Certainly room to do it, but I don't know. I feel like there's this underlying thing with this team, which is, okay, when it gets tough, Jimmy gets the ball because he's the one dude who can create, and Tobias Harris can as well, and Tobias might be better than Jimmy Butler at this point, honestly, but Jimmy is going to still command the ball in those moments, right? And I don't know. It'll just be all really interesting stuff, and depending on what works, what doesn't work, what Brett Brown wants to go to. I mean, Brett has said multiple times that he's had 3 different versions of this team this year. So to say that everybody's on the same page and everybody knows what's going to happen in certain situations, I think that would be unrealistic. So while the advanced numbers are all amazing when these guys are all in the game together, I think there is still some unanswered stuff with them. Mainly on offense, but I guess on defense there can be some interesting things as well. Number one is, do they have a center who can survive besides Embiid? I mean, between Jonah Bolden and Greg Monroe, who I actually forgot was on the team, Boban and Amir Johnson, yeah, you hope Embiid plays mid-30s to maybe low 40s in minutes if he can do it. But in the playoffs, having a 6 to 7 or 8 minute stretch with a center who you're questionable about, that can be the difference between you not only winning a game or losing it, but really winning or losing a series. Now, I don't think that's going to come out against Brooklyn, but in round 2, who would they be facing? They'd be facing the Raptors. I think that certainly is something that could happen. And then if they get to the conference finals, where I think they'd be playing the Bucks, it's another thing. So all these little things are going to matter. Also, who the hell is Shake Milton, just by the way? Yeah, now, as far as other things on defense for this team, I mean, whenever Embiid's in the game, they're great defensively. And I mentioned the net rating stuff a second ago when their main 5 dudes are in the game, so I think their defense is going to figure itself out. Like, I know there's been questions about, do they have a guy who can defend point guards? I mean, between Jimmy and Ben and Tobias, I'm going to assume, like, can one of you just make D'Angelo Russell care? All right, cool. Can one of you make Kyle Lowry and Eric Bledsoe and these type of guards who are not, like, 6'7"? As long as you can just make them work and then have Embiid finish the rest of the defense off, I think they'll be cool. I think the main questions with this team are on the offensive side of the floor. Although, you know, with how good of a pull-up shooter D'Lo is at this point, I guess there is room for that being a question. Like, can Embiid defend that? Even so, I think they'll still be fine in this series because I think he can step up enough on those. I think the real question with Embiid is when he's facing the Al Horfords of the world, the pick-and-pop bigs, but the Nets don't really have a guy who's going to be able to hold with Embiid physically and stretch him out at the center position, so that's still a question, but that's for the later rounds. Yeah, I think all this stuff is going to be interesting. Again, as far as this series itself, like, all the love in the world to the Nets, D'Lo's improvement, and everything they've done to get to this point, but Philly should win this series in probably 5 games. And if Embiid was healthy and was in full-on FU mode, I could see this being a sweep. But I still think we could learn some interesting things about the Sixers along the way, and it could help us to project how they're going to perform against the Celtics, the Raptors, the Bucks, these teams, and all that. So, yeah, I think that's what I'm going to be paying attention to in this series, and that's it.